The Galactic War's tipping point emerges. Empire. The galaxy was on the edge of destruction for years. The war had raged across countless star systems. Alien factions, each with their own motives and goals, clashed in brutal battles, leaving entire planets in ruins. The great struggle for control of the galaxy had no end in sight, and no side seemed able to claim an outright victory. In the midst of this chaos, one faction stood at the forefront: the Vor Empire, a powerful, ruthless empire. Their advanced technology and unyielding military strategies had driven many other species to the brink of annihilation. They were fierce, cold, and relentless, crushing any force that dared to oppose them. Worlds that resisted their domination had fallen one by one. Their ships, sleek and deadly, moved through the stars like shadows, striking fast and without mercy. The Vor had conquered most of the galaxy, and their might seemed unstoppable. The Allied forces, a collection of different species who had banded together to resist the Vor, were losing ground. Their resources were dwindling, their armies shattered, and their hope had begun to fade. Each day more systems fell into Voker hands, and the dreams of the galaxy's freedom seemed further out of reach among the Allies, though there was a sense of dread. The last major battle had been lost, and the enemy's forces were rapidly advancing toward the heart of the rebellion. The leaders of the Allied forces gathered in a dark war room, their faces grave as they reviewed the latest reports. The Vkar were only hours away from reaching their next target, a crucial planet that housed the last remaining supply of military-grade weapons in the galaxy. The War Council's leader, a seasoned strategist from the Zora species, slammed his fist on the table. "We cannot win. The Vokar are too powerful. It's only a matter of time before they wipe us out completely. We must surrender. It's the only way to save our people." His words hung in the air, heavy with despair. The others nodded quietly, their expressions hollow. The thought of surrendering to the viewer, of bending the knee to a race that had caused so much pain, was unthinkable. But the situation was growing more dire. By the minute, there were no reinforcements, no secret weapon to turn the tide. Their last hope had already been exhausted. "Perhaps surrender. It is the only option left," said a voice in the corner of the room. It belonged to Kale, a young officer from the human forces who had joined the rebellion not long ago. Despite his youth, his words carried weight, and for a brief moment all eyes turned to him. But Kale didn't speak out of fear. He spoke because he knew something others didn't. He had been listening to rumors, strange reports from human sources scattered across the galaxy. Earth, the planet that had stayed out of the conflict for so long, wasn't as far removed from the war as everyone believed. The human forces had quietly been preparing for the day they would finally step into the galactic arena. Some of the galaxy's leaders dismissed these rumors as wishful thinking. Earth's forces, they nothing compared to the might of the Vueler Empire. One of the alien generals scoffed. What could they possibly do? But Kale had been on the receiving end of human ingenuity and grit before. The Earth forces, despite their initial lack of advanced technology, had a drive and spirit that no one could match, and Kale thought Earth's silence might not be a weakness, it might be a strategy. For years, humanity had been watching from the sideline, gathering resources and studying the galaxy's war. They were biding their time, waiting for the right moment to strike. Earth wasn't just preparing to join the war, they were preparing to change it. The Vor may have thought Earth was just a small, insignificant planet, Kale said, his voice calm but resolute. But they're about to learn. They've underestimated humanity. The room fell silent. Some of the leaders exchanged uncertain glances. Could Kale be right? Could Earth be the spark they needed to ignite a new hope in the galaxy? Despite the overwhelming odds, something within the War Council stirred a glimmer of hope, a small flicker of possibility that Earth's involvement might be the game changer they had been waiting for. Yet doubts lingered. Was Earth truly ready? Could they make a difference against an empire as powerful as the Vokar? Outside, the sound of distant explosions echoed through the halls. The Vokar were getting closer. Time was running out. Kale, the Zorth leader, said, his voice thick with hesitation, "If Earth is our last hope, then we must act now." A plan began to form. The War Council decided that Earth's forces would be called upon immediately. The hope that had seemed impossible just moments before now had a chance to become reality. The Alliance would wait for Earth's arrival, and pray that humanity's strength could match the power of the Vokar, but none of them knew what was about to happen. Earth's unexpected arrival would not just change the battlefield, it would shake the very foundations of the war, and the galaxy would never be the same again. A new hope. Earth's secret weapon, the war's momentum, had shifted almost imperceptibly in the weeks that followed the War Council's decision. Despite the promise of Earth's involvement, the Allied forces still held little hope. It seemed too late for anyone, no matter how powerful, to turn the tide against the Vor Empire. But deep in the heart of the human resistance, something was brewing. Earth had been quiet for years, keeping to the shadows, but they had been watching, learning, and preparing. It wasn't just the advanced technology Earth had developed, it was something more, something they had kept hidden, locked away from the galaxy's prying eyes. The mysterious project that had been in the works for years was about to be revealed. Earth's secret weapon was not a fleet of ships or a new form of energy, it was the human spirit itself, their determination to fight for survival, to push back, even when every force in the galaxy seemed aligned against them. Kale, the young human officer who had first suggested Earth's involvement, found himself standing before a massive starship, one unlike anything he had ever seen. The ship wasn't just technologically advanced, it felt alive, it pulsed with energy, as if it were waiting for something, ready to unleash its power. The weapon Earth had been building was not just physical, it was psychological. Humanity's will to fight would be their greatest asset. The ship, called the Vanguard, was a marvel of engineering. It was designed to be the vanguard of a new era for humanity, capable of turning the tide of war with the force of sheer willpower. Its weapon systems were unlike anything the galaxy had ever encountered, and its presence alone would send a shockwave through the galaxy. But the true power of the Vanguard wasn't in its weapons, it was in the unity it represented. The ship was a symbol, a rallying point for all the oppressed races that had suffered under the Vueler Empire's rule. Earth's message to the galaxy was clear. No longer would they stand by and watch as others were crushed under the boot of tyranny. Earth was coming to fight, not just for their survival, but for the freedom of the galaxy itself. As the Vanguard prepared to launch, Kale stood at the command console, watching as the ship's engines powered up. The hum of the massive starship filled the room, and Kale could feel the weight of what was about to happen. This wasn't just a military mission, this was a statement. We're not just sending ships to the battlefield, Kale thought, his heart racing. We're sending a message. Suddenly, a voice crackled over the intercom. Commander Kale, the fleet is ready. Earth's forces are waiting for your orders. Kale nodded. The time had come. With a single command, Earth's secret weapon, the Vanguard, would make its entrance into the Galactic War. This wasn't just another fleet joining the battle, this was humanity stepping onto the stage, determined to change the course of history. As the ship's engines roared to life, the first wave of human vessels slipped into the void of space. Their destination, the heart of the Vokar Empire. The Vor, arrogant in their superiority, had no idea what was about to hit them. Earth's arrival would not go unnoticed. The galaxy was about to witness the power of a species that had long been underestimated, a species whose strength lay not in their technology alone, but in their unbreakable will to fight for freedom, for survival, and for the future. The stage was set. The Vor Empire, once confident of its dominance, would soon feel the full weight of Earth's unexpected entrance, and with it the hopes of every oppressed race in the galaxy would rise. With the dawn of a new era, Earth's entrance unseen and unheard. As the first human ships entered the galactic battlefield, they did so quietly, almost unnoticed by the enemy. The Vor Empire, focused on their relentless conquest, had not yet detected the incoming human forces. For years, Earth's fleet had been hiding in the deep shadows of space, preparing for the day they would reveal themselves. That day had arrived. The Vanguard, Earth's flagship, led the charge, its sleek form gliding through space like a silent predator. It wasn't alone. Behind it, a formidable fleet of human ships followed in perfect formation. These ships weren't as massive as the Vueler dreadnoughts, but they were fast, efficient, and bristling with advanced weaponry. But what set them apart wasn't just their technology, it was the courage of those who piloted them. Human resilience was their true strength across the war-torn battlefield. The alien forces were too distracted by their ongoing skirmishes to notice the sudden change in the stars above. For now, They were like a whisper in the vastness of space, waiting for the perfect moment to strike inside the Vokar command center. The enemy's generals monitored the chaos unfolding across the galaxy. They had grown accustomed to victory, their forces sweeping across planet after planet, but their overconfidence was about to be shattered. Suddenly, a technician on the observation deck turned to his superior with wide eyes. "General, we've detected an unknown fleet. They're ENTing the sector near Cure Prime. It's Earth's signature." The general's heart skipped a beat. He had heard of Earth stories whispered among the Vkar elite about a human resistance that had been quietly watching, waiting for the right moment. But he had dismissed these rumors as nothing more than legends. Now those legends were real. Earth had arrived. "Prepare the defenses," the general ordered, but there was a hint of panic in his voice. Earth had remained silent for so long that the Vkar had forgotten the threat it posed, and now Earth was entering the war, bringing with it a mysterious power the Vor hadn't anticipated. Back in the human fleet, Commander Kale stood at the helm of the Vanguard, his heart racing as the massive starship entered enemy territory. The Vor had no idea what was coming for them. They would soon see that humanity's involvement wasn't just about numbers or firepower. Earth's secret weapon wasn't just a ship, it was a strategy. The human fleet would strike quickly, hit hard, and vanish into the shadows once more. Kel's voice came through the ship's communication system, calm and commanding. "All units engage, target the Vor supply lines and strategic installations. We don't want to give them a chance to regroup." The human ships split into smaller groups, each taking on a specific target turret. They moved swiftly, using the element of surprise to their advantage. The Vueler, unprepared for such a sudden assault, scrambled to respond. Explosions rocked the battlefield as human ships tore through enemy lines, disabling car ships and cutting off vital supply routes. The Vokar, still stunned by the sudden appearance of Earth's forces, found themselves in disarray. In the chaos, the Vanguard slipped silently through the battlefield, its weapon systems glowing with energy. It wasn't the sheer firepower that made this ship so deadly, it was its precision. The human fleet was not here for a prolonged fight. They were here to disrupt, to strike at the heart of the Vor control, and then vanish back into the darkness before the enemy could retaliate. The first few minutes of the attack were nothing short of chaotic. The Vor commanders issued orders in a frenzy, trying to regain control of their fleet, but the humans, though vastly outnumbered, fought with a coordinated precision that the Vor couldn't match. The attacks were surgical, targeting weak points in the Vueler ships and disabling them with lightning speed. The sudden onslaught caught the Vkar off guard. Their pride had blinded them to the possibility that Earth could be a threat. Now they realized their mistake too late. Kale stood at the command center of the Vanguard, watching as the battle unfolded on the screens. His crew was working in perfect harmony, executing each move with the precision of a well-oiled machine. It wasn't just military strategy that made them successful, it was the unity that Earth had cultivated in its forces. They had come together not just as soldiers, but as a united force with a single purpose: to end the Vokar reign of terror. "Status report." Kel called out, his voice steady despite the growing intensity of the battle. "Shields holding. Commander, enemy ships are retreating, but there are still pockets of resistance," came the reply. Kale nodded. "Keep pushing forward. We can't let them regroup." The Vokar, realizing they were being overwhelmed, began to pull back, their forces retreating in disarray. But Earth's fleet wouldn't give them the chance to recover. They continued to strike, each attack more devastating than the last. It was only a matter of time before the Vueler realized that Earth's unexpected entrance into the war wasn't just a nuisance, it was a game-changer as the human fleet continued to devastate the Vor lines. Kale knew that this was just the beginning. Earth's forces had arrived, and nothing would ever be the same again. The first encounter, clash of powers, the initial surprise of Earth's entrance into the Galactic War, was still rippling through the battlefield, but now Earth's forces faced the real test, sustaining their momentum against the overwhelming might of the Vueler Empire. As the humans' first assault shattered the Vueler lines, the enemy began to adapt. The time for surprise was over. The Vokar were regrouping, and their response would be swift and brutal. On board the Vanguard, Commander Kale could feel the change in the air. The initial IAL victory had brought a sense of pride, but he knew the true challenge was ahead. The Vor were not just going to roll over. The Vueler Empire had centuries of experience in war, and their generals were ruthless. It was only a matter of time before they counterattacked. With everything they had prepared for counterattack, Kale ordered, his voice calm though his heart was racing. They'll come for us now. We need to be ready. As if on cue, the enemy fleet, vast, intimidating, and seemingly endless, appeared in the distance. The Vor had brought out their heaviest ships, including massive dreadnoughts that dwarfed the human vessels. The sight was enough to make any soldier's heart sink. The Vueler were bringing their full force to bear. The first volley of fire from the Voker ships lit up the star's powerful beams of energy, crashing into the human fleet. The human ships, though faster and more agile, were no match for the concentrated firepower of the Voker dreadnoughts. Explosions erupted across the battlefield as human ships were struck and sent spiraling into space debris, scattering in every direction. Despite the losses, the human fleet held its ground, using evasive maneuvers to avoid the Vueler devastating fire. Earth's ships weren't as heavily armored as the Vor, but they were built for agility. They darted around the car ships, targeting weak points and dodging the enemy's deadly attacks. Human tactics were built on speed, precision, and unpredictability. The Vanguard emerged as the spearhead of the attack. Kale watched as the massive flagship fired its advanced weapons, sending devastating blasts into the heart of the Voker forces. Its weapons weren't just physical, they carried the weight of humanity's resolve. Each shot fired from the Vanguard was a message: Earth was here today, and it wasn't backing down. Target the dreadnoughts, Kale commanded. We need to disable their weapons. The Vanguard fired again, its weaponry lighting up the dark expanse of space, but the Vueler dreadnoughts were powerful and their shields absorbed most of the human fire. The Vor retaliated, launching a massive barrage of missiles, sending them toward the Vanguard. The ship rocked violently as the explosion shook the hull. Alarms blaring through the corridors. We've lost power to the starboard side, came a voice from the engineering crew. Shields are down to 30%. Kale gritted his teeth. The Vor were pushing back harder than he'd expected. It seemed as though no matter how hard Earth fought, the enemy's overwhelming numbers and firepower were going to tip the scales in their favor. Divert all power to shields, Kale ordered, his voice firm. Get us out of this mess. The human fleet, though smaller in number, fought like a swarm of wasps, darting in and out, refusing to give the Vor a chance to land a decisive blow. But the cost was high. Several human ships had already been destroyed or severely damaged. The Vueler fleet was relentless, and despite the initial shock they received, they were now determined to make Earth pay for their interference. The battle was growing more intense by the minute, and Kale could feel the pressure mounting. His crew worked tirelessly, doing everything they could to keep the Vanguard in the fight. Yet, even with their best efforts, the human fleet was beginning to show signs of strain. Their numbers were shrinking, and the Vueler numbers were only increasing. Just when it seemed that the human forces would be overwhelmed, an unexpected sight appeared on the horizon. More ships. Human ships emerged from the shadows, flanking the Vueler fleet. The reinforcements had arrived. Earth had sent a second wave. The Vor generals, momentarily stunned, realized too late that their initial victory had been a hollow one. They had underestimated the resilience of humanity, and now they were paying the price. The Vueler dreadnoughts, once confident in their superiority, were now surrounded on all sides by the unexpected force of Earth's Second Fleet. Kale couldn't help but smile as he watched the reinforcement immense engage the Vor. It was a game changer. The Vor were now facing two human fleets, one from the front and one from behind, forcing them to divide their attention. But even as the battle turned in their favor, Kale knew it wasn't over yet. The Vokar were regrouping for a final stand, and this would be their greatest challenge yet. The next few minutes would decide the fate of the galaxy. Keep the pressure on, Kale ordered. We cannot let them recover. The battle raged on, but Earth's unexpected power had now been fully revealed. The Vueler, though fierce, were no longer the unstoppable force they had once been. The galaxy was witnessing the rise of a new power, a power that would not be silenced. The tide begins to turn. The battlefield was no longer the same. Earth's unexpected entrance had caused a shockwave through the galaxy and the viewer. Empire was finally starting to realize that their dominance might not be as absolute as they once believed. The early victories had come at a cost, but the human forces were relentless as the days past. The viewer hold on the galaxy began to slip. The vanguard Earth's flagship continued to lead the charge. Its weapon systems were a testament to humanity's ingenuity, capable of dealing devastating blows to enemy ships. But it was more than just firepower that made it effective. It was the crew aboard it. The humans fought with a unity and determination that no alien force could match. The spirit of the human race had been tested time and time again, and now that same spirit was lighting the way for the galaxy's resistance. In the war rooms of the Vokar command, the situation was growing increasingly dire. The Vosir Empire had suffered more losses in the past few weeks than they had in the entire previous year. Their once invincible fleets were being decimated by Earth's surprise attacks. Their advanced technology was no match for the unpredictability and sheer will of the human forces. General, we've lost contact with the 12th Fleet. One of the officers reported. The humans have infiltrated our lines again. We can't contain them. The general looked out over the holographic display of the galaxy, the red lights of enemy ships flickering on the map as they were erased one by one. His jaw tightened. The Vokar had always been the conquerors, the ones who dictated the terms of war. Now they were fighting for survival. We can still win, the general muttered, though even he wasn't convinced. He had witnessed how quickly Earth had turned the tide. The initial shock of humanity's involvement had passed, and now Earth's forces were everywhere. The human strategy had become clear: precision strikes, hit-and-run tactics, and cutting off key supply lines. Earth's fleet moved with incredible speed, never giving the Vokar the chance to organize a counter-offensive. They hit where the Vokar were weakest, exploiting every vulnerability. The galaxy was beginning to change. The news spread quickly among the Alliance's factions. Earth's relentless assault on the Vosir was inspiring hope. For the first time in years, the galaxy saw a real chance to stand up to the Empire that had been suffocating them. All the other races began to rally to Earth's banner, joining forces and uniting under a common cause. The Vokar Empire had to be stopped back. On the vanguard, Commander Kale was feeling the shift. The past few weeks had been grueling, with heavy casualties on both sides, but now the tide was turning in Earth's favor. The Vokar had underestimated them, and it had cost them dearly. Kale had watched as the enemy faltered. Their fleets, scattered and disorganized, the once mighty empire now seemed to be retreating, unable to respond effectively to the human tactics status update. Kale said, his voice steady as he looked at the tactical screen. Commander, we've succeeded in cutting off their primary supply routes, came the reply. Their dreadnoughts are struggling to maintain power. Their reinforcements are slow to arrive. We're weakening them piece by piece. Kale nodded. Keep the pressure up. They're retreating, but we need to make sure they can't regroup. Prepare for another assault on their homeworld. The Vokar were no longer invincible, and Kale knew that this was the moment to capitalize on their weakness. The human fleet was now poised to strike at the heart of the Vor Empire, where it would hurt them most. They would break the viewer hold on the galaxy once and for all. The moment Earth had been waiting for had arrived. The Alliance's forces gathered, united under the banner of hope that Earth had rekindled in them. The galaxy's oppressed races, once too afraid to stand against the viewer, now stood alongside the humans, ready to take back their homes, their families, and their future. The human fleet, now stronger than ever, set their sights on the Vor capital. If they could strike at the heart of the Empire, they could bring the war to an end. The final battle was fast approaching. The Vokar would either fall or rise again, and the galaxy would be forever changed. A new galactic alliance forms. The once unstoppable Viewer Empire was now on the defensive. Earth's relentless push had shattered their hold on countless systems, and the galaxy was beginning to change. The tide of war had shifted in ways the Viewer never imagined possible. But as the Viewer retreated, another force was rising, an alliance of races united by Earth's example, determined to end the war and reclaim their freedom. Across the galaxy, the once silent factions, many of whom had been crushed under the Vokar iron fist for centuries, began to awaken. The human victory, however small, had ignited something within them. What was once a fragmented resistance was now a united front. Species that had been oppressed by the Vkar for generations saw in Earth's strength a symbol of hope. Earth wasn't just fighting for its own survival, they were fighting for everyone. The Zorth, once fierce enemies of the Vokar, now pledged their fleet to Earth's cause. The Scion, a race of humanoid creatures with powerful psychic abilities, brought their unique talents to the fight. The Raxa, a species of hulking warriors, offered their unmatched strength and combat prowess. Together, they formed the core of a new galactic alliance, one that would no longer stand idly by as the Vokar sought to enslave the galaxy. In a high-level meeting aboard the Vanguard, Kale stood at the center of a table surrounded by the leaders of the newly formed alliance. Their faces were weary, but filled with determination. The once separate factions had now become a single united force, something the Vokar never expected. Kale addressed the group. We've taken down their supply lines, crippled their fleets, and shown them that they're not invincible. But the hardest part is still ahead. We're about to strike at the heart of the Vueler Empire, their capital. If we destroy it, we destroy their entire infrastructure. We take down their leadership, and the war ends. A Zorth general, leader of one of the strongest fleets in the Alliance, leaned forward. The Vkard will fight with everything they have. We cannot underestimate them now. I don't intend to kill, replied his voice firm, but we have something they don't. We have unity. The Vor's strength is their oppression. We've shown the galaxy what happens when we stand together. We've shown them that the Vor are not gods, and they can be defeated. The Sane representative, a tall, slender figure with eyes that glowed with psychic energy, spoke next. We can use our telepathic abilities to disrupt their communications. If we can isolate their leadership, we can create chaos within their ranks. Kale nodded. Exactly. The Voter thrive on order and control. If we can break that, they'll crumble, but we need to strike fast. The meeting was filled with intense discussions and strategic planning. Every species had something valuable to offer, whether it was advanced technology, superior combat skills, or unique abilities that could turn the tide of battle. As the discussions continued, the sense of unity among the Alliance grew stronger. They were no longer separate factions fighting for their own survival. They were a unified force with a singular purpose: to crush the Vokar and bring peace to the galaxy. The Vor, still reeling from their previous defeats, were unaware of the brewing storm. The leadership of the Empire had become complacent, believing their might was unassailable, but the alliances forming against them were starting to gather in full force, preparing for the final confrontation. While Kale and the Alliance leaders planned their next move, the Vokar were in disarray. Their once indomitable war machine was grinding to a halt as their supply lines faltered. Their vast fleets were in retreat, and the once confident generals found themselves unsure of how to regain the upper hand. Desperation set in, and whispers of rebellion started to surface within their ranks. Their empire was crumbling, and they were powerless to stop it. In the midst of this turmoil, an emergency meeting was called in the Vor capital. The Supreme Commander, a ruthless and calculating figure, addressed his council. We've underestimated the humans. We've underestimated the power of unity. But we will not surrender. We will not fall. He slammed his fist onto the table, his eyes burning with fury. We will fight to the last. This galaxy belongs to the Vor. It always has, and it always will. But even as he spoke, he knew that the fight ahead would be unlike anything the Vor had ever faced before. The human forces, bolstered by their new allies, were about to launch their final assault. The Vokar could no longer rely on their overwhelming strength to win. The galaxy was united in a way it had never been before, and they were ready to do whatever it took to end the Vokars' reign. Back in the human fleet, the final preparations for the assault on the Vokar capital were underway. Commander Kale stood on the bridge of the Vanguard, looking out at the vast expanse of space. Earth's forces had united with the galaxy's oppressed races, and together they would bring an end to the war. We are the future of this galaxy, Kale thought. We will not let the Vokar extinguish that future. The final battle victory, defeat, the final moment had arrived. The combined fleets of Earth and its newfound allies had assembled in the shadow of the Vor capital. It was here, in the heart of the Vokar Empire, that the fate of the galaxy would be decided. The air was thick with tension as every ship in the human alliance prepared for the largest battle the galaxy had ever seen. Commander Kell stood at the helm of the Vanguard, his eyes locked on the view of the distant car capital. The enemy's fortress-like city stations glowed ominously, their massive shields preventing any direct attack from the outside. The Vueler Empire had thrown every defense they could muster around their homeworld, but they had no idea just how much the galaxy had changed in the past few months. This was not the same war they had begun. It was a new Chapter 1, where Earth's forces, along with their allies, were about to deliver the final blow. Prepare for the assault, Kale ordered, his voice firm yet filled with the weight of responsibility. This ends today. The entire bridge crew was ready. The ships of the Alliance were positioned in perfect formation, awaiting the order to strike. The last few weeks had been filled with planning, strategizing, and preparing for this very moment. The Vokar had believed they were untouchable, but now the Alliance stood united with Earth, their combined might ready to break the enemy's chains of control once and for all. Far below in the depths of space, the Vokar commanders observed the human fleet, realizing the magnitude of the force now arrayed against them. It was too late to retreat, too late to regroup. They had no choice but to face this assault head-on, hoping their last-ditch defenses would hold the Vueler supreme. Commander paced nervously, his mind racing with thoughts of how to salvage a crumbling empire. We must hold the Supreme Commander muttered. This is our last stand as the Vanguard and the rest of Earth's fleet approached the Vueler capital. The massive battle stations began to unleash torrents of fire. The skies above the planet lit up with a deadly barrage, and the first wave of ships from Earth's alliance was caught in the crossfire. The humans had planned for this. Their fleet was fast, their tactics refined, and their determination unyielding. The battle rayed in every direction, with the vastness of space becoming a deadly chessboard where the slightest misstep could mean destruction. Human ships DED around the massive car stations, evading the heaviest fire while delivering crippling blows to the enemy's defenses. The fleet's numbers were smaller, but they made up for it. With their speed and precision, their attacks were sharp, their movements coordinated. Kale watched from the command center, his heart pounding as he saw their forces begin to make headway. Hold steady, he whispered to himself, just a little longer. As the battle unfolded, Earth's allies, every race that had suffered under Vokar rule, fought with unshakable resolve. The Zorad's powerful warships pierced through Vokar shields, creating openings for human ships to exploit. The Rexa warriors launched themselves into the fray with relentless force, taking down car stations with terrifying efficiency. The Sealan, with their psychic abilities, disrupted Vokar communications and wreaked havoc on their command structure, sowing confusion and chaos within the enemy ranks. Yet the Vokar were no fools. Despite their loss of territory and their shrinking fleet, they still had formidable weapons at their disposal. The Vor retaliated fiercely, unleashing every weapon they had to stop the onslaught. Their flagship Dread fired massive energy beams into base, targeting the heart of the Alliance's forces. For a moment, it seemed as though the Vokar might win this final battle. One of the Hum ships exploded in a spectacular fireball, its debris scattering across the battlefield. Another ship was hit, its shields failing as it spiraled into oblivion, but Earth's fleet didn't falter. Each loss was met with renewed determination. For every fallen ship, there were 10 more ships ready to take its place. Commander, the Vanguard is taking heavy fire. An officer called out, shields are down to 30%. Kell's heart raced, but his resolve remained unshaken. We knew this would be difficult. Push forward, we can't stop now. The final phase of the battle had begun. Earth's fleet, despite its sacrifices, was closing in on the Vor capital. They had one final objective: disable the Vokar main power core, the part of their war machine. If they succeeded, the entire empire would collapse. The fleet moved forward with the ferocity of a storm, determined to end the conflict once and for all. As the human forces neared the Vueler capital, a massive explosion rocked the battlefield. The Vanguard's weapon system fired its final shot. The massive beam sliced through the Vokar flagship, tearing through its defenses. The enemy ship erupted into flames, and with it the hopes of the Vueler to maintain control. A cheer erupted among the humans and their allies as they witnessed the massive Vueler dreadnought begin to crumble. The shock from the explosion sent tremors through space, and the remaining Vor forces began to retreat. The war was over. The final blow was dealt when the Silent Fleet disabled the Vueler power core, cutting off the last source of their energy. The remaining Volker forces, now scattered and leaderless, were overwhelmed by the full strength of the Alliance. Hell stood at the command center, watching the destruction of the Vueler Empire unfold before him. His hands were steady as he gave the final order. Hold position. The battle is won. For the first time in years, the galaxy was at peace. The Vor, once a ruthless empire that had controlled the stars, had been brought to its knees, and it was humanity along with its allies that had brought it down. As Kel gazed out at the stars, he realized that this wasn't just a victory.